Okay, let's talk a little bit about the materials for the assignment itself. So I have my blue painter's tape. Okay, I have about 3 containers. These are all just like empty containers I've collected. So there's like some that are glass, porcelain, and frosted glass. Some of them are a little dirty, which is okay, but I need to clean them. I do have my India ink. This is the India ink droplet, which is, again, you always want to shake, make sure it's tightly closed. When you open it, just unscrew it. And then you could be able to use the drops to actually showcase how much ink is coming out of it, okay? Something to consider. And if you don't have your India ink and you want to use your Sumi ink, this is the Sumi, okay? This is your Sumi ink that I would highly recommend to use. Now, you'll notice too, both of them are obviously black, but one has a more richer sort of pigment in terms of the rich blacks, which is the Sumi in relationship to the India, which is a little bit more cooler in terms of its color. Excuse me. I also have my bamboo brushes, okay? So I have one small and one large that I'm going to be using. This is all that you need, okay? And then I have my best friend, which is the paper towels, okay? This is crucial towards this assignment, so keep that in mind. What I would like to do is, I have my water bottle here. I'm going to add some water here. I'm going to add a little bit more here. And I'm going to add more. I'm going to add a little bit there, okay? Now, I also have another container here, which is empty, which I'm going to actually add all the water. Okay. Then I'm going to take my brushes and I'm going to leave them in here. Okay. And what I like to do is know that this is my clean container. Okay. I have 1 container, 2 container. Okay. Move this on the side so you guys can see. And then I have my 3rd container. Okay. And I'm going to remove, obviously, the rest of the materials. So I have my paper towels on the side. I also have my India inks. What's really important, and I'll do this with the India ink just for the sake of the demo, is before we even start this assignment, we have to figure out what reference we need to use. So for the sake of this demo, I'm actually going to use a reference I just found online, which I will show. And just for you guys to get an idea, this is the reference I'm going to be using. Now, I do have another reference I have posted on canvas.com under the Maldives tab, which is the Haurimad Mountains located in northern Iraq. But just for the sake of the demo, I would like to change it up and use a different reference. This is just something I found on Google that I'm going to start to use for my reference, unless if I have a volunteer, if somebody has a reference they would like me to use for the demo. Going once. Going twice. Okay. So I will be using this as my primary reference. Okay. Now, what I like to do, excuse me, is again, by starting the drawing itself, I also just to sort of need to keep in mind that when I have my reference ready to go, it's already cropped. I'm happy with my composition. I'm just making sure that's aligned with my paper size. So let me actually do a screen share so you guys know exactly what I'm doing. So I'm again adjusting the image itself to making sure it's cropped enough. I'm going to remove some of the edges. And again, being mindful and considerate about the composition. What am I using? Oh, okay, it's going to duplicate. Okay. I'm also then going to be using my pen. And again, by just dividing my composition, okay? So I'm going to take one corner here to the bottom left and another corner here to the top right, okay? And I'm going to also do the same thing here. Do it on the opposite side. So the bottom right and then now the top left, I now have my center, right? I also need to add another vertical line that runs through the entire middle, okay? So I have one over here And then I need to make a horizontal line that does the same thing that goes through the entire reference horizontally. Just making my adjustment, making sure that's clear. Okay, now did this make sense so far? Now I have a much more manageable perspectival space that I could use when I'm gridding my landscape, okay? Now, let's go to the paper and let's talk a little bit about these 4 squares because this is also crucial. And this primary step, what I would like for you guys to do, if you can, is to use the system of creating 4 squares on your drawing paper pads as your preliminary draft, okay? What do I mean by this? So again, I have my hand over here, okay? I have divided my Strathmore paper into 4 squares, okay? Everybody can see this? Oh, hold on, my camera's slightly off. Okay, I have 4 squares, okay? I've left about a 1-inch gap all the way at the edges of my paper, okay? Always, I'm using my blue painter's tape, but for the demo, I have my paper towel, okay? I'm gonna have my India ink for my actual medium and not my Sumi. I'll use my Sumi ink for the next one, just for the sake of the demo. But I'm gonna recreate the drawing 4 separate times on each square, okay? I'm gonna do one for 1 minute, another one here on my top left, on my top right, I'm gonna do one of 3 minutes, and I'm gonna do another one here on the bottom left for 5 minutes, and then lastly, I'll do this one in 7 minutes. Questions about that so far? Okay, so I'm gonna take my first container and actually dump all that water out, okay? And then I'm gonna add pure India ink. I'm gonna just take my eyedrop or my droplet and just add the ink. You don't want to add too much. A little bit goes a long way. This whole container, we can all actually share as one class, by the way. That's how much ink is in here. If we all diluted this with water, we all can share it as an entire class. So I have some ink here, okay? I'm gonna take my, I'm gonna start using my brush, okay, my small brush. And now what I want to do is, again, this is my container with my clean water, clean off my brushes, okay? But then always, if you can, use the rim of the bowl or your container to kind of remove the excess water and use your fingers to make a point, okay? Get a nice and sharp point. Now it will act like a actual pencil, okay? Did that make sense? And a part of this is that I don't want to hold my brush like a pencil because it's not a pencil, it's a brush. So you want to hold it towards the middle or towards the end of the actual brush, okay? And you want to hold it directly 90 degrees off my paper. You don't want to hold it as an angle like this. So you don't want to hold it at an angle. You want to hold it directly 90 degrees off your sheet of paper, okay? Just for the sake of the demo. Any questions about that so far? Okay, I'm going to zoom into this first square, okay? I'm going to roughly recreate the reference by just using the image that I have, but also being mindful of how fast I need to go. Now, a part of this assignment is that I want everybody, not just me for the demo, to do this while we are actually practicing. And you need to upload a completed reference of the actual 4 preliminary drawings with your completed drawings by next week, FYI. So you have homework for this week, okay? Not only do you have your actual first for your main drawing for your landscapes, but you also have to submit your 4 squares that you've divided with the Strathmore paper, with your blue painter's tape, and also submit this, because it will then show me that you were able to research and practice by using some methods of time to recreate each drawing, okay? Questions about that? Okay, now I've zoomed in on my first square, okay? Again, I'm just gonna mark. This is, go ahead.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Javier.
So is there any equivalent to this other assignment for 112?
No,
Okay.
you may do this if you would like, but if you would like to watch the demo, by all means, you could stay.
All right.
To answer that question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, so here I have 3. I'm gonna mark down just 3. The next one will be, what did I say? Actually, hold on, this will be, let's say, this is 1 to 2 minutes. This is 3 to 4 minutes, to give it a sort of range. This is 5 to 7 minutes. And this is 8 to 10 minutes. I'll give it more sort of freedom, okay? Now, can somebody keep a timer and say say 2 minutes? Who could do that for me while I start?
I can.
Okay, is that Aria?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Now,
2 minutes?
I'm gonna, 2 minutes before you start. Hold on, Aria. I'm gonna also just, again, this is my pure black, okay? My container. I'm just gonna remove the excess amounts off the brush, okay? This is my small brush. I'm gonna go to the next container, okay, which has more than enough water. I'm gonna dump a little bit out of it. Okay, this is not too much, okay, not too much water. I'm gonna clean off the brush, but I'm actually gonna use this as my first medium. So this will be my first medium, okay? Alrighty, so hold on, let me just make sure this is correct. Aria, give me 1 second. Let me zoom in on my image. Okay. Ready, Aria?
Yep.
Let me know, tell me to start.
Start.
Okay, so I'm gonna really quickly map out my composition. And all I'm adding is just slight layers with a lot of water of my India ink. And this will help me figure out what's important, what do I need to have on my perspectival space, and how do I ground my composition? Okay, I'm just figuring out the foreground, the middle ground, the background, some of the clouds. Okay, now it's a little bit harder to see on my camera, but if those of you who are following along, you guys will use the same method to apply this sort of strategy. And now, again, always take your paper towel, and you could also blot some of that amount of water. So if it's too much, you also take your paper towel. Okay, I'm just indicating here. And I feel like I'm almost done. Right about, I'm gonna say that's it. I'm done. Aria, what's my time?
You have 40 seconds left.
Okay, I'm gonna write down 40 seconds. Okay, just so I can remember. So this took about 1 minute and what? 20 seconds, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
The reason why I like to do this is because I'm just sort of generally getting my composition. I'm not worrying about any details. I'm not worrying about any values. I'm just trying to figure out foreground, middle ground, and then background. It's a little hard to see because the water is still wet, but I'm gonna jump to the next one, okay? And then Aria, if you want to time me on that one, this is 3 to 4 minutes. Let me just move my camera. Actually, I gotta move my paper. That's better. It's a lot easier to do, actually. So I'll do, okay. Zoom in. Now this is 3 to 4 minutes. Is that straight? No. Come on. Okay. Paper towel here. Now I'm going to take the same container. Okay. Now you could use a separate container, or you could use the same container. And I'm actually take my brush, pick up more of my ink, load that up. I'm actually going to fill it in there once, do it again. That's twice. That's a lot of ink. And even prior to starting, I can also take, if I can, what I love to do is always have a scrap sheet of paper just in case. And I always like to make a mark and say, okay, is that mark too dark or too light? I actually like it. Let me just mix it one more time. That's pretty good. I'm actually happy with that. So I'm going to leave my scratch paper on the side. Okay. Alrighty. And then Aria, I am ready when you are.
3 or 4 minutes.
Yes.
So 4.
Yeah. Go.
Okay.
Should I start?
Yep.
Okay.
You can go.
So then now I have more time to focus on smaller details on my foliage. Using the side of my brush. Again, being mindful not to add too much detail, because that's not important, but I'm just sort of separating water to land. I'm using the entire side of the brush to kind of grab more of the ink to kind of cover the surface of my paper. And I notice while it's still wet, I'm going to move it around my paper. So I want to get that general shape in there. But then you could also take, for example, some of the paper towel, pick it up, and have a really interesting lighter scale of that value. So that's another approach. I'm just dabbing the background because those are the smaller pine trees in the background on the mountain. And since this is Washington State, I know there's a lot of larger pine trees out there, but I'm also wanted to articulate that with the amount of brush marks. Okay, you see how loose that is? I'm going to make a similar brush mark, but a little bit bigger to separate that foreground and background. And then Aria, how am I doing on time?
You have 1 minute, 40 seconds.
Okay. I'm going too fast. Let me know, guys. And I'll leave a little bit of that empty space in the background. Okay. Also the clouds. I can go over these layers once it's dry. Notice it's becoming darker the more and more layers I add. But now I'm sort of happy with this composition. Okay. How am I doing on time? Few seconds?
About 40 seconds left.
Have some time. Making some swirls on the bottom to showcase the rocks. I want to build that texture. Okay, I'm happy with this, so I'm going to stop. What's the time?
10 seconds left.
Okay, so that's 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Okay, questions so far? Do you see how quickly I'm working? Okay, now let's go to the next. Move camera. Oop. Okay. Notice, and also too, first attempt of the sketch is so much drier now, I can go back and add layers. But for the sake of the next one, okay, this is 5 to 7 minutes. Again, I have my paper towel right next to me. Then I have my container. I'm going to go back to my primary ink, which is in here. It's still a little wet. You don't want it to dry. I'm going to add 2 more strokes. So 1, add that in there. 2, 3. So I add 3 sort of amounts of ink. I need to also take my paper, just in case, my scratch sheet of paper, and then make a mark. And I want to compare the two, right? Are they closer or are they similar to each other? Make another mark just in case. More bolder mark. Okay, that's still a little too light. I'm going to add more ink. So I'm going to have 2 more. 1, 2. Now let's try this one more time. That's a little bit better, but I'm actually going to add 1 drop into my container. That's a lot already, but just for the sake of the demo, why the hell not? 1, 2. Let's see how that looks. Always, always, you want to do this before. Okay. That's better. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay. So take my scratch sheet of paper, and I'm going to keep this. I don't throw this away. I go back to it as a reference. I go back to it as like one of my sources. I'm going to take my paper towel and cover this area so I don't go over, just in case if things do spill. And that's okay if they do. You can always go back and try to fix it. But then now, what I'm going to do is start the next part. So I'm going to camera slightly, and then REA, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so we're doing 5 to 7 minutes.
You can start.
Okay. So I'm actually going to start from the background first. I'm just making some strokes in these entire areas to again showcase the illusion of those pine trees. But also here, what about, let's say, that's the center. In this area, this is where that next middle ground will be. Water. Now I have to be careful not to add too much water, because if I do, this will blend into this. You got to be very careful. Okay, you have to let it dry. You have to really take your time and let it dry. There's the water. And it's okay if the composition is bulkier or thicker, these layers, because when I go back, I can refine those areas. I can make them a little bit more tighter. from their perspectives. This is the first pine tree. There's a big one back there. There's another one right over here. Over that one as well. There's another one here. Now it's a little bit more legible because it's darker. Notice how dark that becomes once you just add water, but it bleeds through that surface, which I need to be mindful of, okay? But I like that high contrast. This composition. Notice now I'm worrying a little bit more about the detail. In the first preliminary drawing, I didn't. Now I can. These bushes are a lot more rounded. Making some sort of vertical lines to showcase the stem of those trees because I start to see them closer. Looking in the bottom, there's larger rocks. So I'm just swirling my brush over and over. I don't want them to touch yet. I'm gonna wait for that area to dry. And I'm going to take my brush and each one, okay, each sort of tree, I'm going to do a zigzag, do another zigzag, do another zigzag, because they're slightly different. Almost sort of like pine Christmas trees. But I'm going to fix that composition once it's dry and then add more layers, more vertical lines that showcase the base of those trees. But I need to wait for that to dry. I cannot rush this process. But then here, I'm going to actually add just a really harsh, dark value because it's sort of where those shadows are for those trees back there. But I just want to make sure, notice I'm going around. I want to be careful. Notice I'm adding a little bit more water. Now it's starting to move and bleed. I need to be very careful because I want to control the water. You need to be very mindful at these stages, guys. You cannot rush this process. My veterans will know this. You cannot rush ink. You have to wait for it to be patient and dry. But notice I'm molding the trees in the middle ground, okay, by using water instead of really making it diluted with too much water. You want to just be considerate of the fact how much you add. And I don't want to lose all the richness I've added prior. But by diluting the water, I now notice how the color variations of value, this will be lighter, this will be darker, this will be the darkest. Depending on your image, I should say, excuse me. But I'm going to make the middle ground darker because it seems a lot darker on my reference. Aria, how am I doing on time?
About a minute left.
Okay, thank you. And my water. And there's that nice sort of base, which is right up here. Notice it starts to move and bleed, which is okay. Sort of the rocks here. Textures. Going slightly a little bit faster since I only have less than a minute now. I'm not worrying about that detail. Remember to time these guys. Okay, write it down so you don't forget. Okay, part of this process is sort of figuring out that sort of composition.
Oh, your time's up.
Okay, so this is the 5 to 7. Let's look at this holistically from the beginning first so far. Okay, now I have a really interesting perspective of how far I started and then how I shifted to 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, simplifying it even from the first one. And then now I'm refining it a little bit better with this one. And now I have another, my last one I'm going to do, which will be do 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. So this is the most time. That's straight. Is that better? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is actually, without even using my scratch sheet of paper, I'm going to just jump to my first container, add a little bit more ink, and actually just add a hair of water, just a hair, so not too much. Okay, so what I can do is take this container, you guys can see, and add some of the water here. That's one. Mix them up, that's two. That's more than enough. Okay. Now, what I would like to do with my test, okay. See how this looks? That's really black, which is fantastic. Okay, let's start. Are we ready? Are you?
Yep.
Okay, we have
I'll
8.
start it now.
Start now?
Yep.
Okay. Alrighty, I'm gonna take my brush. Not gonna take too much. Okay, I have my paper towel here, so if I do need to blot it, I can do that. So I can take off excess water. Okay. I'm just using the tip. And I'm just almost scribbling it in because I want to sort of figure out the majority of that composition. I'm going to use the same strategy that I applied from my first and third attempt. Just covering these trees. Foliage down here. Notice I'm not reloading too much of the brush. It almost now looks like an ink drawing with pure ink and a little bit of water. So there's not too much water. Okay, that's where the actual base will be. This will be my foreground. building upon the texture using the tip of the brush. Notice how loaded the brush is. It doesn't feel heavy because it has too much water or too much ink. It's just, I just know this by feeling the texture of the surface of the paper and seeing how it reacts and making sure I don't go over work the drawing. Guys, if anybody has questions, feel free to speak anytime. Inside, brush, reload. Center would be right around here. Smaller folios of those curves. It's bigger. There's also branches over there. There's trees at the base. And some of them are curved because they're almost angled, which is interesting. Because now I can start to see that more. Just slightly higher. With my brush. Okay. And I notice this is a lighter yellow from my composition. I'm going to leave that be until it's dry so I can go back because I need to add some more tonal variations to that. And I'm going to darken some of the negative space around the tree to showcase a contrast of value. There's almost the bedrock of this hill with all these trees you can start to see through, which is interesting from the beginning of the base of the hill to how it gradually slightly goes up. Center is probably right about here. There's a tree. That's right there. There's more foliage. And I'm still using my same brush, okay, for all of my drawings. When you want to get to your larger brush, that's when you cover a lot more ground, a lot more surface to your paper. Okay. Now this almost looks like there's scribble marks, which is fantastic. Now I can start to see more of the rocks in the water. Okay. But then I'm also going to go back and then go to this container, take my brush, load that up, and I'm going to use this as value for the water to separate it. Because again, I need to use value to separate the amounts of lights and darks within the drawing. But then that also separates it from middle ground, foreground, and background. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the sky. But then I'm going to just dry my brush and then use it while it's still wet, blend it into the background. And that's key. And I love that texture, so I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to go back and actually use the same container because I like the amount of ink to water ratio, it actually makes the same stippling marks I made earlier for the mountain. Because once it's dry, it'll dry lighter for my third attempt. So I can have some variations of that, which is important. You want to show variety and diversity within that. You really want to be able to then explore that by experimentation. Any questions so far? Oh, I added too much water. Hold on. When that happens, quickly take your paper towel. Remove. This is how you erase. Ink wash is by time. You got to be really quick. And that's going to dry that way. So keep that in mind. Notice there's variation between how dark this is, how dark this is, but then how light that is. It's a middle tone. Add some value here so you can fill in that space. Okay. Aria, how am I doing on time?
You have about 1 minute and 10 seconds left.
And now I'm going to go back on dark, start adding the darkest areas in my drawing. Time.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Now I am so happy with the image. I have a general idea of everything, of really strategizing my paper to sort of showcase what can I do in 1 to 2 minutes, what can I do to 3 to 4 minutes, how can I jump to 5 to 7, and then 8 to 10. I want everybody to do this and submit this with your drawing and your reference by next week, which is the due date and critique. Any questions so far?